So please share this with colleagues and patients also. This is a very important topic, death and loss and grief. So please share it with your patients too. I know I'm planning to. Again, welcome Tamsin. Happy to have you here.
Thank you.
And happy to start this conversation. And I always like to start by understanding, how did you come about to become a Shiatsu therapist? How did Shiatsu found you, or you found Shiatsu?
It found me. I think so. I was in my 20s. I just moved to Bristol in England, and I had no previous experience at all with complementary therapy or anything like that at all. But 3 separate people on 3 separate occasions said, "Have you tried Shiatsu?" And on the 3rd time, I thought, I'll try Shiatsu, but I didn't know what it was. I had my first session with Sandra Reeve, who was trained with Sonia Morisot in Wales, who I always hoped to do some training with after that, but I never did. She's not with us now. And it was an amazing experience. I remember I was a trained dancer, and it felt like I was being danced by her. I was lying passively on the futon, and it was like she was dancing me, and it was the most beautiful feeling. And 2 sessions later, a major life symptom, physical symptom, disappeared. And that was, I had been told, it's the curse and I need to live with it for the rest of my life, despite the fact that I'd been hospitalized twice by then. So it was pretty miraculous on top of that. So I was a client for quite a long time. And when I was about to come back to Scotland, the woman who was then giving me Shiatsu in Cardiff, she said, "It's time you learn to be a practitioner." And I was like, okay. I didn't know what that entailed, but she gave me the name of the Glasgow school, and that was me, really. So yeah, I think I'm lucky.
Yeah, the statement of that you have to live with this for the rest of your life, it's exactly what we call the placebo and nocebo effect. And a colleague of ours has talked about it recently, Chris McAllister. I don't know if you follow him.
Yes, I did. I heard it, yes.
But we had a discussion around that too, the placebo and nocebo, and what you say to a patient is so important.
Yes, that's right.
I remember when I started my Shiatsu schooling, I was fortunate to have a part-time job in a hospital setting, taking care of a 92-year-old man. So for about 6 months, and I had the honor of experiencing a man dying in my arms.
Okay.
And it was such a powerful experience that changed me as a young man, and while I'm studying to become a therapist. And
yes.
And ever since then, over the last 20 years, I've been again honored to be present with death. So for me, it's a very deep and personal topic. And even last year, I had to be with a cousin of mine that was dying from cancer. And I will say there's so much wisdom in death, and there's so much power in death that comes with that experience. And as a therapist, it's such a powerful experience and a powerful lesson.
Yeah, it really is.
On so many levels. So, that's why we're talking to you. Like, how did you come about working with loss and death? What was that path for you like?
Well, I think it was probably initially stimulated by the death of my father. I was regularly teaching and offering Shiatsu at the time, and of course it interrupted both my actual work, because I was traveling down south to try to be with him in the last months of his life, and emotionally and spiritually it interrupted what I was doing, and it had a huge effect on what I was on my work. We were saying before, weren't we, that when something big happens in your life, you often end up attracting clients who are also concerned with those same issues.
Yes.
So I had a great influx of people who either had a life-threatening illness themselves, or had dying relatives and friends and colleagues. So it really was something that that was taking up my time then. And as I say, I was teaching regularly, and I felt that in order to be a good teacher, I really had to introduce it to my students. I really had to make sure there was time set aside in the curriculum for people to think about this and to talk about it. And so I started teaching it as a unit in my 3-year training program, and I think it was for about 10 years, really, just quietly doing that with my students.
That's a powerful module and teachings to share with students. Maybe you can share some of the aha moments for them, and maybe for you too, working with death and loss.
Yes, Michal. I think one of the first ahas that the students have is simply opening up the topic to the group, giving people the opportunity to say how they might have come across death personally and or in their practice. And even however small the group, the experiences are so varied. So each student hears not only somebody else who is experiencing something the same as they do, and so they feel validated in some way, that's yes, I recognize that. But then they are also stimulated by how very, very differently people approach the topic. Some people are very religious, some people are completely atheist, and all the range in between. And people have very, very strong emotional reactions to it. So just listening to people in the group expressing their own feelings is immediately an eye-opening experience. And then when we open up and talk about how might we meet death, then very quickly people realize that it's everywhere. It's in almost every single session that we do with a client, whether it's the fear of it, whether it's the fact that it's actually happened, whether it's the result, it's a bereavement, whether it's what you do in your life in preparation for it or in order to avoid it. There are so many different angles, and the more that the students brainstormed, the more that they worked in small groups, quietly talking about it, the more they realized, oh gosh, this really, it's going to be impossible for me as a practitioner not to come across it. I will come across it in my work, and therefore, right, okay, this is worthwhile. And the third thing I wanted to say is that then we start to look at how might you want to be with somebody who is facing death. And people, of course, especially students, come up with practical suggestions. Well, we can do this to help them. We can do this to change it. We can, until we start to get down to the real essence of the situation, when between them they come down to the realization there's not much we can do about it. So how will we be with people if they are in that state? And then we really start to look at, what do I need to do in myself as a practitioner? Where do I need to be within myself in order to be able to be with somebody who's facing death?
Beautifully said. I know I'm always amazed as a collective, and in many societies, we have such a blind spot around death. It's the ultimate truth. I mean, it's a fact. We're all gonna die, and somehow it's something that we just have a blind spot around. So many of us, and again, as societies, why do you think that is? Why, after so many years, we still carry so much fear around that?
It has so much power. I agree with you. It's certainly in the UK and other Western countries, we've been moving closer and closer to a sense that science can answer the problems of our world, that science can sort things out. And at the same time, a sense that we are very, as a human race, we're very powerful over nature, over any other animate beings. And one way or another, we've managed to persuade ourselves, maybe not consciously, that we can pretty much deal with stuff. And then there's the elephant in the room. There's the fact that we all know people, or we know somebody who knows somebody who's died unexpectedly, suddenly, tragically. And that is such a shock when you are somehow led to believe that you have power over something. So I think that's part of it. And of course, it makes us feel helpless. It makes us face the essence of ourselves, our own fear, our own anger, our own helplessness. And that's never very comfortable. There's not lots of room for it in our lives, most of us. We don't clear away the busyness and the work and the doing for very long to be able to look at that. And when we do, if it scares us, then there's another good reason to just have another drink, or just to pick up the phone or open the computer and get on with something.
Which leads me perfectly to my next question. I mean, during this pandemic, there's so much room that is being cleared for us, on so many levels. And, sitting with yourself. I mean, after you finish the drinking and after you finish the distracting, there's so much you can do of each. At some point, you have to sit with yourself. What I'm noticing is, again, that intrinsic fear that comes up with loss and a possible death, right? It's possible for all of us. How, from your experience with working with loss and that how you personally have gone about dealing with this period and this pandemic, and maybe what's your advice or tips for others, again, from your experience, regarding how to deal with this collective loss, this collective grief, this collective undercurrent of possible death. So please, I look forward to hearing.
Yeah, it's a really big deal, isn't it? The longer it goes on, the more stories we hear, the more we know of somebody close to us or a couple of stages removed, who, if they've not faced the illness themselves in an extreme way, have relatives they can't reach, have friends they can't hug, have people and know people who need support and who are not getting it. And certainly for the Shiatsu practitioners, we're really open, and so we really feel that suffering. So I suspect that a number of people are doing what I'm doing and limiting themselves to the amount of time that they engage with it in terms of the media, the television, the radio, social media. I know that I feel a lot of suffering in my own self when I come across other people suffering, and I know how to manage that. I know I have a practice, I have things which I've taught myself and that I've learned which support me, but there is only so many hours of any day that I can face that. Part of coping with it is finding that balance. So it's trying to stay alert to it, isn't it? It's trying to stay honestly, authentically aware of what's happening. The fact that people are counting their dead every day. We haven't lived through that if we haven't been in a war-torn country. We've heard about it at a distance from ourselves, but a lot of us haven't been directly involved in war or earthquake or other tragedy. So this is a really, really different situation. And I feel that there has to be something I feel I can do to support or to help. I feel I have to open my doors in some way, metaphorically, either just privately or through messages, keeping in touch with people. But I have to stay healthy and balanced in myself. I have to acknowledge that I really feel it. It really affects me, and therefore I have to find the balance. And I'm like everything else, if I feel more balanced, if I can be centered in myself, I think I can be of more support to other people.
Beautifully said. Otherwise, we get hurt, we burn out, we are affected, we take it on. On the way here, while I was driving, I heard on the radio, one of the struggles will be all this unprocessed grief.
Definitely.
Or not being able to be there when your mother or your father or your relative or friend has died because of the restrictions, right? And not being able to be there as those long-term consequences, in a way, it's not enough the trauma of someone dying, but it's quite traumatic when you're not there. You feel helpless. You weren't there for that person when they were suffering. And on the other side of the coin, all the frontline workers had to be there. Where in the past, the family came in and friends came in and community came in to help, through the process of death, of someone dying. But now the frontline workers had to be that person. So the long-term effects can be quite devastating. And there's a coalition here in Canada that is trying to, in a way, prepare the government and our society that there'll be some long-term effects from this, and they're going to need tools, support, and resources.
There are many layers of things that are going on. Some people are living with people who are very sick, who are not getting treatment. Some people are living with people who are connected with people who are very sick, who are not getting treatment, who they can't reach, as you say. There are the people who are having to work and having to do jobs which they were not prepared for and which they were not trained to do. I mean, most medical staff are not trained to to support people emotionally and spiritually. That's not in their training. And I've heard some lovely stories from people who are in hospital, not necessarily with the virus, who are having a much higher staff to patient ratio than usually they would ever expect. And they're having wonderful experiences, and I'm sure that they are being supported really well. But as you say, the staff, that is something as Shiatsu practitioners, which I don't know, but I think probably most of us see doctors and nurses and other primary healthcare staff and so on a regular basis. I know I do anyway. So I think, I mean, it was working in hospice like I do, it's extreme enough for me to just walk in the building, because every member of staff, never mind every relative, never mind every patient that's in there, is dealing with all of this, all of these levels that we're dealing with regularly. But now that they're all alone in that building without the relatives, as you say, and everything, there's going to be a lot that we can do, and we're trained to do that. We're trained to sit with people who are suffering, but we do need to look at what death means to us. We do need to face it in ourselves first. I really believe that.
I agree 100%. Because my early experiences definitely helped me in my practice, going to a hospice environment or someone's home environment and dealing with death. And that was going to be my next question. How what you've learned and your experience in those environments, how do you apply them in a hospice environment as a Shiatsu therapist, as someone that inevitably in their practice at some point, if they choose to, would be asked to work on someone who was passing away?
Oh yeah.
Tips as a Shiatsu practitioner would you share, or your approach in general?
Well, it's developed since I went in. Initially, I thought I would be doing what I usually do, and I don't. I am a very great amount of what I do on a day-to-day basis in my private clinic I can't do in that type of environment. So I have had to let go of that. I've had to accept that that's okay. That if I don't do a horror diagnosis, if I don't follow certain protocol, these types of things, I have had to accept that. It's been very good for me. I think the thing I face most is that sometimes I only have 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and I have to believe that I am doing something positive. That as I hear myself say that speaks about my personality, but sometimes it's so simple. It's like all the stories I've heard people tell me, it's about holding somebody's hand. It's about moving your hand when you feel that is the right time to move it. It's about opening your heart so that when that simple touch is happening, you can allow yourself, your chi, if you like, to flow. So it's very simple. Very often it's very simple. I'm working with a huge number of people who have, well, a big group of people who have no movement at all, perhaps a finger or an eye, or very, very, very limited movement. So the scope of things that I can do when you think of the techniques we're taught, and the rotations and the movements and the this position and that position, and there you are working in a situation where you can barely touch the person because of all the tubes and the paraphernalia. They may be in pain, they may be other people around them, they may, there's so many extreme situations. So the most important thing that I've learned is the simplicity and the importance of simplicity of touch, that to really just open my heart, which I thought I always did, but I hope I always did, but but how important that is, and to approach that with humility.
Yes. Yes. That's my biggest lesson from that is humility. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good one. Well, tell us about your book. We are so excited about a book coming out to our community. I always feel like it's like delivering a baby.
Yes, it is.
As a family, we are looking forward to this baby to come out. So tell us a little bit about your book, when it's coming out, why you wrote the book.
Thank you. It's called Death and Loss in Shiatsu Practice, Holistic Bodywork in Palliative Care. Comes out on August the 21st, all being well. It's quite a big book with a lot of pages, and it's pretty thorough. That's one of the comments that the people who've read it keep saying. So I guess, yes, it's the sort of summary of, it was the joy of it for me was being able to put down the things which I've experienced, the things that I've learned, the wonderful stories I've heard from other practitioners. There's lots of other practitioners' stories in there, you know, to sort of spill it all out really, and to put it all in one place. That was the joy of it for me, and to gather together the things that the experiences that I've had. I've tried really hard not to make it a teaching book. But there are, of course, some exercises in there, and there is a lot of theory in there for the people who need that, both Chinese medicine, 5-element, and Zen, and I touch on other forms as well, movement Shiatsu, and so on. It looks at the client, it looks at the practitioner, it looks at the client-practitioner relationship, it looks at love, it looks at listening, it looks at boundaries, it looks at the many thousands of ways we meet death that I've sort of expressed a little bit already. As I say, there's lots of stories in there, both from my own experience and from other people. So a lot about ritual, and because that's very present in these types of situations, people automatically seem to turn to that, and I find it's very supportive. And by ritual, I'm you know, that might mean a beginning, a middle, and an end to a treatment, or it might mean an actual, I don't know, little presentation, or it might be light a candle, or by ritual I don't mean a whole funeral. It might be much smaller than that, but ritual anyway. History and tradition. So I've looked at, I mean, that's a massive topic. They wanted me to cover that. And it's a whole book to try to look at traditions of death in different countries and through the ages and so on. But I've used some examples because it's so fascinating. There's a big, there's a part about practicalities, about practitioners preparing their clients in case they die, what you need to put in place, both in terms of, you know, the sort of admin side of things and tax and that sort of thing, but also, you know, who tells your clients if something happens to you, what happens to your notes and records. So there's that sort of practical side of things. All the tricky things, like what happens if a student dies, what happens if one of your colleagues dies, how you support each other or not, how you carry on practicing, or when you choose not to practice, if you're grieving. So yeah, pretty much goes through everything I could think about. It turned out that I had, you know, just so many real life experiences with clients over the last 30 years. And as I say, with other people who've kindly donated their stories and told me their experiences as well. So I cover a little bit about working in traumatic situations, you know, working abroad, like the woman there's a Shiatsu practitioner who works on Lesbos, for example, with the, you know, the awful situation of the refugees who arrive there at the moment, and so on.
Wow. I can't imagine how long it took you to write that book, but there'll be a lot of gold nuggets in there, I'm sure, for all of us on many levels. Yeah.
So
It sounds very comprehensive.
yeah.
Well, I want to open the forum to some questions from you, ladies and gents. So if somebody wants to share or ask a question, please raise your hand. Don't tell me you're all shy, too. Any questions from any of you?
Dawn says that she believes that a good heart, opening our hearts, can really help someone, and that working on ourselves of our own stuff. She says she gives remote healings and uses intention, and the heart chakra energy reaches out far and touch very deeply and can be even more effective than non-remote treatments. That's really interesting, Dawn. Do you want to say anything out loud?
Yeah, thank you. It's been so interesting hearing you both. And, you know, grief touches us so deeply. We've all experienced it. You know, with some of the examples you've given, I have experienced that. Even know people whose, you know, a parent has died in the last few weeks and they can't be at the funeral, they can't get in touch. So deep grief. And what you said, about frontline workers having to deal with this, take on board all this other stuff. Yeah, so I've been doing some remote healings as well, and it takes a lot of work, actually. It takes maybe even more work than when somebody's in the room, because you've got to prepare. Well, I have to prepare myself beforehand through meditation, and even I have to get into a particular mode before I can tune into to them. So yeah, and a lot of that comes from here. I think this it comes from the heart chakra, you know, so I think that's the basis of it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
Yeah.
Sonia, you had a question?
I think our hearts automatically open, and I think more so, especially if it touches us. But the important thing, I think, is to remember to then go back into Hara later, to go back to the ground later, to go out for a walk later. But yes, I think a lot of it comes through there. Thanks.
Sonia, I saw you raise your hand.
Okay, I was not, but anyway, I'm going to speak. Hi, Desert. Are you okay? Well, now I'm not with clients, and also I was on my second grade of Shiatsu with my teacher, and now I'm not doing it because we can't do it, and we are hold on to see what's going on. But nevertheless, he's giving some classes of Qigong, which is great. I've been doing it. It helps a lot with the energy, with myself. I'm working at home with remote working. And what I feel more is like some waves that come, like energy, like people are thoughts and emotions and things like that. It's what I feel more. Myself, I'm okay, but sometimes I feel woo, like some wave comes and then passes away. It's something that I've been experiencing and recording it so I can feel it. And also I'm giving classes. I'm also a coach. I'm giving classes online to a group of senior people. And what I feel most from them, they are somehow escaping from doing some activities and working with thoughts and thinking about what's happening, but in a positive way, of course. But they are escaping. They don't want it. They don't want to be active, like some hibernating. They want to be cooled down, and I'm respecting that, of course. But that's what I feel like. oh, hold on. Now I'm not doing it. I don't need it. I don't want it.
Mm.
So it's something I'm feeling now, and these are two thoughts just for the talk that I felt
Yes.
during this period.
Oh, thank you so much. I think, yes, that's something I wanted to say and forgot to say, and you're absolutely right. That's another thing which I've learned, Michal, from doing this work, is that I don't have to put it into words. I feel it. It might be almost overwhelming. It might be an enormous feeling that I have, but I don't need to put it into words or to say anything. My job is just to be there and to be aware, as Sonia said, to notice the waves, to be aware of the internal activity or the energetic activity, but it doesn't have to be, I don't have to say anything out loud.
Yeah, it's interesting that response with your group, Sonia. As I find the seniors that are around me, you know, are very similar. There's a very similar response to that, and it makes me think if it's a self-preservation mechanism or a generational mechanism. I'm not quite sure.
I think it's also they are not so much protected. They are more sensitive. I feel that it's not we are much than other people or the worse, but it's more they feel more, and they will not be more accessible for that. So I think it's what I feel about that. I think in a way it's normal.
So maybe it's protection that we need to
Yeah.
support them with. How can we help them protect? How we can teach them some basic techniques or exercises that help with that protection,
but
without having to talk about it or say anything upsetting.
But in another word, being open if they want to talk, okay? Being open to talk a little about the subject to see what's happening, but let it go and accept it, not forcing it. And that's what I'm trying to do. So I think it's the way.
Beautiful, Sonia. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else had any questions or would like to share? Yes, Cordula. Nice to see you again, Cordula.
Hi, Michael. Yes, I have a question for Tamsin, just for the conversation. What do you think? Do you think as a Shiatsu therapist, it is necessary or not to have had the experience of death and loss by ourselves before being able to be with people in that situation?
Well, Tasmin, you want to answer first?
Yeah. Thank you very much for your question. Is it Cordula?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Well, not in terms of death. No, I don't think that's important. I don't think you have to have experienced death or sat with somebody as they've died. But I think it's useful to acknowledge that every human being has experienced loss of some sort. It may be a so-called smaller loss of getting older, of moving house, of losing an earring. I mean, I'm not trying to be silly about this, but we all feel loss on different levels. So I think that we don't need to magic up a situation of loss. We may need to acknowledge, it may be useful to ask ourselves, what loss have I felt? How was this loss different from that loss? How did I deal with it? How did I feel? Those questions I think are very, very important for us as practitioners. I think we have to ask ourselves those questions. but no, I don't think we have to have direct experience of death. No, not because in the same way as I don't have to have suffered from Crohn's disease to be able to support somebody with Crohn's disease using Shiatsu.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing with Shiatsu, touch, right? So just creating that space with touch for the intelligence of the person, the emotional, maybe even spiritual intelligence of the person to be expressed naturally. So that's my suggestion. You don't have to necessarily have experience with death to feel confident working with someone who is dying or someone who is grieving, and just to use our hands and our intention to allow the natural expression of it.
Although not everybody wants you to touch them if they're very sick or if they're dying. Sometimes they don't even want you to touch.
It's true. Yeah, sometimes there's too much pain or it's too much. There've been too many intrusive instruments inside the body, and it's too much. Yeah, respecting what they need at that moment. Yeah. I was gonna ask something. Gisela, go ahead.
Thank you, Tamsin, for your very interesting sharing with us. So I'm not so experienced yet with Shiatsu, but my question is more into how do you preserve yourself? What do you do for yourself as a practitioner? So if you have this as a main job, and if you have several persons per week maybe who have this issue, you say you have more people coming to you. So how do you cope with it? What methods do you have?
Thank you, Gisela. Thank you. I think the most important things are the awareness and the self-reflection. I have to set aside time to do that. I have to allow myself time to feel how I feel in response. And then I can deal with that sometimes by writing, sometimes by talking in supervision or with colleagues. I walk a lot. Anybody that knows me knows that I do that. I do a lot of Qigong. I meditate every morning. So the same things that I expect a lot of practitioners do, a lot of, stretches. I constantly have to remind myself that that doing these things are not indulgences. They are the way that I prepare myself to be able to support the real extremes of emotion and spiritual distress. So I have to spend time doing those things, and I have to do them regularly. But mostly it's awareness. Mostly it's awareness. My learned patterns, my taught patterns get in the way, especially if those of you who work in hospitals or busy clinics will know when there is a need, when people need, there is this, we want to try to give, we want to try to be with as many people as possible, but there must be space in between, there must be space before and after, there must be, time, there must be time for reflection and quiet and processing. Otherwise you'll notice, I notice that I can't keep doing the work. People stop coming, or my sessions get cancelled, or I get sick or whatever. So yeah, for me really it's about reflection and awareness more than anything else.
Thank you. I look forward to your book.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, we all do. Anybody else One second. Yeah, Cordula?
Just want to know, Tamsin, well, you said you're working in a hospice, so you are employed by the hospice, or they are just calling you when somebody is in need, or it's the family who is calling you, or it's the person herself or himself who is saying, I want that?
I'm the really lucky part is that I'm part of a team. I'm part of a complementary therapy team. There is somebody, I have a boss, if you like. There's somebody who is the head of the team, and we each have different complementary therapies that we offer. I'm the only Shiatsu practitioner, and I behave as if I am an ordinary member of staff. Like the nurses, the doctors, the occupational therapists, everybody, but I'm not paid. The woman who's the head of the team,
Okay.
the woman who is the head of the team, she is paid part-time. It's three quarters of the time, so it's almost a full-time post. And one of the other members of the team is paid part-time, much less, and the rest of us are voluntary. And I have a really big issue with that. I really wanted to do the work. I'm really glad to do the work, but especially with this whole situation that we were the first group of people that were told not to come into the hospice, and I really felt that so keenly. It made me really angry, because they say that we are part of the team, that we are valuable, they say it all, but as soon as they needed to make changes, we were the first people that stopped. And that means that the patients don't have that opportunity. They don't have that outlet or that contact. So there's a really lot of work to be done. I mean, the woman who's the head of my team knows that, and she says that she's trying for funding. But I always say I can tell why she's the head of the team and not me, because I'd be like, you have to. And she's really calm and very sensible, and takes her time. And I think she has a strategy. I think she will slowly work towards it. She wants me to be paid on a sessional basis, on an hourly basis. But hey, it's brilliant work, so it's worth doing.
Beautiful. Anybody else have questions? Yeah, go ahead.
I would like to say that, Tamsin, I feel that your work and your book make Shiatsu more visible in our society. Because it's a direct link between Shiatsu and how it is connected with specific benefits to specific group, or a process that we all go through as human beings. And you make visible how precious Shiatsu and we Shiatsu practitioners can be. And I think that this is valuable. And I want to congratulate you, because your work helps me.
Thank you.
As a Shiatsu practitioner.
Thank you, Panayota, thank you. When I was writing it, I really thought a lot over the whole year that I was writing it in a very concentrated way, who might read it. And because I was talking about it all the time, of course, to the staff at the hospice, for example, to friends and relatives, to people who have relatives who are in hospices or in hospitals, I realized that there was the possibility that there might be at least sections of the book that might be read by people who are not practitioners, even though the publishers are very clear. They say that it is for practitioners. so I have written with that in mind, which you probably know, and so I have tried. I really have gone into how important this work is to us as practitioners. I've tried to get across how incredibly authentic and heartfelt and how deep our training is, how much we think about it, how much we prepare, so that in the hope that even if one or two medical staff, for example, read it, or if, people's relatives, if they're thinking, what can I do to help my mother at the end of her life, might, as you might come across it and say, well, this sounds like something that might be supportive. So yes, I really had that in mind when I was writing it. But it is a big heavy book, so it's and it's an expensive book, so just have to hope there's lots of copies in the library. I think I just have to give lots of copies to libraries, but I'm hoping that, but it will be available as an ebook, and that will make it cheaper as time goes by, and with a bit of luck the publishers will allow me to break it up into sections and then share sections with people that are more relevant, because the theory section is really dense. I mean, the Chinese medicine theory about the Po and the Hun and, all of our theory that we know, I've gone into an enormous amount of depth about it that isn't in any other textbook that I've discovered. I've really elaborated over on the old, the old textbooks, the really old ones. So I don't think that information is anywhere else. It's very personal. I mean, it's through me, but that's not going to be of much use, I imagine, to people's relatives. I don't know, but at least it's there. So at least it shows how much theory we have behind us. So yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for saying that.
And I feel that this book also shades light to our professional awareness as Shiatsu practitioners, because maybe there are Shiatsu practitioners who have no idea about how Shiatsu can be applicable in this
settings.
Applicable.
In death and loss during this process, I mean.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes. Well, last words, Tamsin, before we wrap it up.
Oh, well, thank you very much, everybody, for coming and being with us. It's a real privilege, and thank you so much, Michal, for organising it and for inviting me. I'm very happy for people to contact me if they want to personally, and to share, anything or to ask anything. Please do that, and please say that to anybody who wasn't able to be here. Yeah, thank you very much, and
thank you, Tamsin, again.
Look after yourselves.
Yeah, it was such an honor to have you here and hear your wisdom, and we can't wait for this baby to come out, your book, into our Shiatsu community.
You say 21 or 20?
21st of August, 2021.
Next year?
Oh no, 20.
This year on 21st of August. Oh.
August.
Good.
Thank you all for joining us. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next week with our next guest. Thank you again.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend. Bye.
Bye.